Hey, look around the office. Do all of the managers, all of the leaders seem to share certain personality traits? In our experience, leaders typically get promoted because they're good at getting things done, Rob. But listen, do leaders actually tend to have similar personality traits?
Yeah, it's a great question, Pops. I mean, clearly there's a tendency to pick people, frankly, that are like me. I mean, right? Handsome, smart, outgoing, very intelligent, humble. But is that always a good idea? And that's the topic of our show today. Do introverts make lesser leaders than extroverts? Welcome to the Counter Mentor Leadership Podcast.
Hi, I'm Kelly Riggs. This podcast is about leadership, but not just any kind of leadership. Counter mentor leadership, which is our approach to dealing with the chaotic four-generation workplace. It's leadership that works, not theory or hypothetical models. That's the challenge. The workplace has changed dramatically, but the way managers lead has not.
I'm Robby Riggs. The problem is ineffective leaders. Research shows that as few as 1 in 7 leaders are effective. The purpose of this show is to make sure you're not part of the 86% of leaders who are failing. In a sarcastic kind of way, of course. Welcome to the podcast. By the way, if you'd like to read our book, Counter Mentor Leadership, How to Unlock the Potential of the Four-Generation Workplace, we'll tell you how to get a free hardcover copy at the end of the podcast.
Hey, welcome to Counter Mentor Leadership, episode number 45, where a young son decides that he is the prototypical leader, and he's so incredibly humble, confident, outgoing. What, handsome, really?
Yeah, definitely handsome. Actually, I think that was number one.
I think we lost 95% of our listeners. So if you're still with us, welcome to episode number 45. You can follow us, by the way, at Counter Mentors, at Kelly Riggs, at Robby Riggs. And go find all of our past podcasts on iTunes. Hope you subscribe, or you can find us at countermentors.com. Robby, this one is going to be fun. And by the way, it was all predicated on an article that came out right at the end of the NFL season. We're just now getting it, where the New York Jets fired their coach, Todd Bowles. And I want to read this to you. It was from an ESPN blog post. It says, quote, "They need someone with a strong personality. A big part of this job, any head coaching job for that matter, is presentation. A coach has to sell himself and his program to the public, and that wasn't one of Bowles' strengths. He could be engaging away from the cameras and microphones, but he never let that side show in public. He was nothing like his mentors, meaning he said little and showed no emotion. The job demands an it factor, especially in a market such as New York City. They need a culture-changing presence, someone who isn't intimidated by the Super Bowl drought and the stigma attached to it. Somebody like Bill Belichick."
I just listening to that the whole time. I mean, everyone on the show knows that we're diehard Pats fans, and it's that's the exact opposite. I mean, can you argue that Belichick has a quote-unquote big personality because of how he's so anti-social, especially with the media? Maybe, but again, the point of this is a strong personality with the media. Like, that's what this is saying, and it's like it's not. I don't know. But to your point.
Well, what's really interesting about this is we both, of course, come from Oklahoma, where I still live, and you moved away to some alien planet. But anyway, we're both Oklahoma Sooner fans, and Bob Stoops was the antithesis of a media personality. In fact, most of the media, they weren't really in love with Bob, in terms of his press conferences. But dude could win, right? I mean, so this whole thing just kills me. In fact, what's really interesting to me is that one of his predecessors in New York for the Jets was Rex Ryan.
The definition of a big personality.
Oh, he was going to promise the moon. He did make it to the playoffs, but the guy went 46-50 in his 6 years. So, I mean, really?
That's right. With multiple losing seasons, right? I mean, so it's so interesting. And I think this idea of, Pops, we joke about this all the time, that when someone is born, you look at him, you're like, oh my gosh, it's a leader. Like, leaders are born, they're not made. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And, we do so much leadership development and executive coaching. And we have people tell us all the time, well, I don't have what it takes to be a leader. Why? That's always the number one question we ask. Well, because I'm not charismatic or I'm not outgoing or I'm not, but those aren't requirements to be a successful leader. It's been proven in research, which we're going to unpack a lot of that today. But Pops, my number one question to you is, a lot of people don't know this about you, but you are actually an introvert that has learned the behaviors of what it means to be a leader, to be a great sales executive and salesperson in his own right. So talk to us about your personal journey as take the personality test. You are an introvert. Share that with the audience.
Well, to be fair, I'm borderline introvert. I'm kind of more what a lot of people might call an ambivert. But my first Myers-Briggs assessment placed me into the introvert region of things, and I have all the personality traits of an introvert. I prefer stay home, read a book. I'm not a work the room kind of guy. Never have been. In fact, the work that we do with audiences and with training classes and all that really drain my energy in terms of having to be on stage and be,
But hold on. Let me jump in right there though, because you say it drains your energy, yes. But that doesn't mean you're not great at it, and it doesn't mean that you don't work a room, because I've seen it. I've seen you do it in leadership development and keynote speaking at your church. You're walking around with a group of 150 people. You're engaging with multiple, from kids up to elderly people. But you do it and you do it well, but it's emotionally exhausting. So I want to clarify that.
It is not my thing. Now, I assume that as you get further down the introversion scale to where it's almost like, you don't want to be seen and you cover your head and, in meetings and stuff like that. Here's the reality. For whatever reason, we are built physiologically and psychologically to determine that certain people are leadership potential because of not only their personality, Rob, but their looks.
Yeah.
Okay, let me share this with you. This one blew me away. This is from an article called "The Look of a Leader." There was a guy that had an experiment in which he took pictures of candidates from 57 French parliamentary elections. He was in Switzerland, and none of these people were familiar to these school children. Okay, so they were showing these pictures to school children. In each case, the pictures were matched for race and gender. The school children predicted the winner of the election 71% of the time. And when he asked, crazy. And when he asked Swiss adults to do the same thing, he got very similar results. Here's what's interesting. These findings suggest that adults may use the same decision-making processes as children to choose their leaders. 4 big things that he came out with this. People only need a fraction of a second to make accurate predictions based on looks. That's
so just really quickly summarize the study. Kids were given a bunch of photos of past elections, and they said that person's a leader. That person's a leader. Yeah, and they're doing it. Just to summarize that. Yeah.
Yeah. So totally random. They said, okay, here's 4 people. Which one would be the leader? That guy, based on looks, and he or she won the election 71% of the time, which is way better than throwing darts, right?
Way better. Yeah.
There is widespread agreement on which person looks more leader-like. Similar results are obtained even in different cultures, and young children and older adults may make very similar leadership judgments. Now, here's the reality. As you've pointed out, all the research clearly makes this plain. Looks and personality have nothing to do with leadership effectiveness. However, we tend to choose people as leaders based on extroversion and their confidence, and they're willing to step out in front of people. Right.
So when I said that being handsome is made a leader, that wasn't completely wrong, is what I'm hearing you say. It wasn't completely wrong.
I am vomit. But the apple didn't fall far from the tree. If we're going to go.
I know. Thank goodness I look like my mom. So the point here is that we have this bias, because that's definitionally what a bias is, right? It's leaning towards something. So we have this bias, and this is where the question comes in as for whether we're talking about our feminists or people like me who are short and feel like we're discriminated against because we're short. But yeah, you're right. So you have these people that go, hey, this isn't fair. The playing field isn't level because we have this bias. And it's so interesting because these are school children that did this. This isn't people who have been bombarded by the media for 15 years. These are school children. So
and adults did the same. So it seems to be like internal, right?
And I guess obviously this article is from Psychology Today. As we always do, we'll post all these articles on the podcast site at countermentors.com. But I think what's interesting here, Pops, is that can we now state with some confidence that if you don't have the quote unquote look of a leader, which they go into in this article, that would seem to, it would not be a illogical jump to say that you do have to overcome certain things if you don't have that classic look of a leader. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. The research goes further than that. The researcher says that there is a huge bias towards gender of picking males as leaders, and that transcends cultures as well. So you've got a lot of things working against you. I had one particular executive team that I worked with that used DISC as an assessment. You and I are both very familiar with DISC. And they told me, we will not put anybody into the executive team or an executive leadership position who is not a D personality. And you and I both know that's a major,
such a mistake.
That's a train wreck, right? Because you get a group of D's in a room and I mean, somebody's going to get hurt.
It's going to be a knockdown, drag out fight. I mean, that's just, it is what it is.
And you don't get any other perspective from anything that you do. There's this real bias that says extroversion and confidence and decisiveness and those kinds of things really determine who will be a good leader. The fact of the matter is it's blatantly not true. And we're going to show you the research that supports what we're going to say.
So what we're saying here is that, yes, there is a bias towards what people look at and see as a leader, right? Objectively. However, that does not equal performance, the performance of that leader. So, and just really quickly for everyone listening, introverts, you guys know this, enjoy quiet concentration, think before they speak, listen more than they talk, etc. Conversely, extroverts enjoy multitasking, seek the spotlight, they think out loud, they just get stuff done and worry about it later. I mean, so you're talking about two very contrasting styles,
right?
But that does not mean that introverts are worse leaders than extroverts, or said the other way, extroverts are better leaders than introverts. It's just not true.
It's absolutely not true.
And Pops, your example of the executive team, if you have a bunch of extroverts, that's going to be a freaking problem. Yeah.
Well, plus there's going to be a huge bias towards introverts in the workplace as well. But it makes no sense to me just to choose a personality. On the other hand, there's another big bias that we see over and over and over. And this one to me is the hardest one, or the harder one to get away, because in my mind, it makes more rational, logical sense. And that is typically the people that we promote to management positions are people that are great at getting things done. There's nothing wrong with that, except that we don't tell them when we promote them that they're no longer required to get things done. They're actually required to get things done through other people. So we actually set a lot of people up to fail. We take our great performers, regardless of personality style. We take our doers on steroids, and we say, man, that individual going to be a killer leader. And many times we promote them without any training, without any preparation, and they suck.
Well, let's be clear too. Most of the time, there's a bias there in how we promote too, because we see and perceive the louder, harder charging GSD personality as the one that's a high performer. When in reality, you could have someone who doesn't call out all their successes, who doesn't say it's all about me, who's just sitting and working diligently and really churning through a lot of work, but we don't see them as a high performer because they don't remind us how great they are all the time. So there's also a bias that happens there. And when we layer on top of that, we think a leader looks like, 6'2", white dude, broad-shouldered, gonna make decisions, gonna make it happen, and square jaw, all that ridiculous stuff. Yeah. So when we layer all those in, it really creates an environment that leaders have to be intentional about seeking out what it means, what are the leadership behaviors they want, and what is people who have a want and have the upside, the competence to become a great leader. Because leaders are taught, they're not made.
That's right. I mean, there is a sense, by the way, to be clear, because Robbie and I have done at least 2 recent episodes on emotional intelligence. You need to go back and listen to those. I mean, there is a sense in which your nurture and your nature contribute to your emotional intelligence. Your emotional intelligence can be influenced by changes in the way you perceive and do things. In other words, you can grow and mature your emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence, more than any other factor, impacts your effectiveness, not only as an employee, according to Travis Bradberry, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, but it also impacts your ability as a leader. Rob, self-awareness, if you don't have self-awareness as a leader, I don't care how confident you are. I don't care
Doesn't matter.
You're going to have a problem. If you can't employ self-regulation and, not shoot the messenger and other kinds of things where you respond and react to problems in the workplace, you're going to lose credibility as a leader. If you're not empathetic towards people, emphatically, you are going to be a bad leader because your people won't trust you. They won't go to the mat for you. So, you're mostly trained in the skills that become a good leader. And I was having this conversation last week. So much of what we read about leadership is all general. It's leaders are transformational, and they're charismatic, and they're authentic, and all these things. But people want to know, hey, look, okay, fine. What are the practical, tactical skills that I need in order to be an effective leader? And this episode has a lot to do with that as well.
And whether you're introvert or extrovert, and Pop, that's a great segue. Let's get to that. Let's go to the other side of this break, because I really want us to talk about what it means, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, the behaviors you need to exhibit to be successful as a leader. We'll talk about it on the other side of the break.
Hey, it's Robby. People often ask us if we work with companies, do we actually train leaders and train management teams, or did we just write a book? Well, of course we do. You can find all the details and more of these podcasts at countermentors.com. Or for more information, you can send a message to kr@countermentors.com.
Hey, welcome back. We're talking introverts or extroverts. What does it mean as a leader? What are you doing? Your host, your boy Robby Riggs. Find me on Twitter @Robby Riggs, and the Pops on Twitter @Kelly Riggs.
Wait a minute. Are you Handsome Rob from the Italian Job?
I feel like I need to be Handsome Rob after this episode. We're gonna get Warner Brothers on the phone. We need to trademark that. Also, Pops, we didn't tell anybody about our sponsor. Today, this episode is brought to you by Opening Day, Major League Baseball. Baseball is back.
You're thinking, wait a minute, we have a sponsor.
Wow. So no, here's why I'm bringing this up. I'm bringing this up. It's very important. Quick segue, or quick aside. I was listening to the sports radio yesterday. Opening day was yesterday. We're filming this on the second day of the baseball season. And there was a guy in New York talking about people down south, and Pops, I would include you in this, don't understand the greatness of opening day because the weather doesn't suck where you are. The weather hasn't been 10 degrees and blowing snow for 4 months, okay? Opening day has something different in New York, Boston, Chicago, everywhere north of the Mason-Dixon, St. Louis. So I'm just happy because that's spring. It was 55 degrees and sunny here in upstate New York yesterday. It's opening day baseball, baby. I'm happy. I just need to get that out.
That's good stuff. Those of us down south of that Mason-Dixon line, we're just smart enough not to live where the weather is.
There's got to be truth to that. The reason why we yell and scream so much in New York. So, Pops, tell us about this article, Introverts, Extroverts, Who Makes the Better CEO?
Well, it's really interesting because they point out the world's most comprehensive leadership study done by G.H. Smart's CEO Genome Project. By the way, you'll find the link on our show notes on countermentors.com.
But by the way, can I jump in for a second? That is the most sexy, smart sounding project I've ever heard. G.H. Smart's CEO Genome Project. We need to rename our show. That's awesome. I trust them. I don't even know what they're about to say, but I trust them. Anyway,
it sounds intellectual, doesn't it?
It does. Right? Yeah, it does.
During their research, the team identified 4 primary attributes of CEOs and produced other findings that challenged widely held assumptions about leadership. The study took place over 10 years, pulled information from a database of 17,000 C-suite executives, over 2,000 CEOs. 14 different researchers participated in this, expertise in psychology, economics, finance, and data science, which reviewed all of this information. So we're going to talk about these 4 things. This is not a small data set, okay?
Huge longitudinal study, big data set, right? So there's good stuff in this. This isn't, we looked at 4 companies, okay? This is big.
Okay, so here's number 1. Number 1, extroverts make better leaders than introverts. I was shocked.
That's not true.
Okay, that's not true.
Yeah, you're lying. Yeah, I just you can't even throw that one past me. We're baseball. You threw a slider right there.
You got the guy on the cycle. He's doing 20 miles a day, and he just about wrecked. Okay, sorry.
That's right.
Number 1 thing: decision making, deciding with speed and conviction was one of the primary attributes of effective CEOs. People described as decisive were 12 times more likely to be high performers. Now, here's the rub to that. Who tends to be more speedy in their decision-making criteria? D's and I's, the extroverted personality. So Here's a big lag for introverts because they tend to be slower in terms of evaluating information. They want to get more. They want to avoid risk, and all those kinds of things. But when people are called decisive, you know what this doesn't say, though? It doesn't say necessarily how long it takes. So that's speed. Okay, so if you're going to drag this sucker out for a week or something, then people will go, really? I mean, I could have already.
So this is the first tactical thing for my introverts listening. If we know that the perception of being decisive, right? Typically, if you are a more analytical introvert, you need time to think through things. So here's what you do. If you know you're going to a meeting where you're going to have to make a decision, make sure that team provides that presentation, that data, their Excel spreadsheet ahead of time so that you have 2 or 3 days to comb through it, to think about it, to send follow-up questions. So when you get in the room, you can make a decision and someone goes, oh, wow, like she's decisive. Well, actually, that's not natural for you, but what they don't know is that you spent 3 or 4 days consuming, thinking. One of the guys who's great at this, friend of the show, my co-founder at Sanasano Consulting, Ken Wilkins, he is definition. I give him such a hard time about it. I mean, analysis paralysis defines him. But what he does is he does that on his own time. And so when he gets in a meeting where a decision has to be made, he's like, here are the 3 reasons why this is the right decision. People go, holy crap. Like that dude, he's decisive.
Ken, I got your back, buddy. I got your back. I'll take up for you. Okay, it does take you a long time, but when you make
but he's
awesome,
and he's intentional about when he gets in that room, he's going to be decisive, and so he does a great job of leveraging his strength, which is being analytical, being a thought leader, really looking at every angle. Then he comes prepared to that meeting, and he's perceived as decisive. That's him knowing himself and then setting himself up for success. So he's a perfect example.
And I think you're right, Rob. This is such a great tactical thing because when we get into a meeting and you're dissembling and you're like, well, I need to think about it and all that, people immediately, because of our physiology and our psychology, say that guy, that individual, that woman, that whatever is not a good leader. I wouldn't choose them as a leader. But if you do all your prep on the front end and come in and you're very decisive inside the meeting, people go, wow, there's somebody I can get behind. Right?
That's exactly right.
All right, number 2.
And by the way, but one other thing associated with that is people who are described as decisive, a big part of that is confidence in your decision too.
Yes,
I mean, if you are like, well, I think maybe, people have left. Like your opinion no longer matters to them. So rolling your shoulders back and having that decisive, quote unquote, decisiveness, but it's that confidence of saying, here's what I see. Here are the 3 factors. I would go with option 2. Okay, dude. She has her act together. He has his act together. So again, for those of you listening, especially introverts, you're taking notes on this. You have to roll the shoulders back, speak with confidence whenever you make that decision.
At the same time, Rob, just as an aside on this as well, you can't take the political thing. Well, if this happens, I would do this, but if this happens, I would do this. But so you're trying to be nice and sort of accepting of everybody. Leaders make decisions, and they have to make decisions. If you make the wrong decision, introverts or extroverts, you got to own it. You said good leaders own their bad decisions, and good leaders make bad decisions far less than bad leaders, right? So it works that way. All right, number 2, engaging for impact. This says good CEOs quickly achieve buy-in from their employees and their stakeholders. Here's what that means, Rob. It means that even though I'm an introvert, I've got to be able to communicate effectively, even if it's one-on-one. Hey, introverts, you don't have to always get up in front of a group of people and be, this powerful, charismatic, dynamic speaker. You can build your base behind you one-on-one, one meeting at a time where you feel comfortable, but you've got to engage your employees and your stakeholders. If you don't, it's going to impact the way they perceive you as
and frankly, you're going to fail, right? We've known since Kotter wrote Leading Change decades ago that having that guiding coalition, that group of people behind you is critical to drive change. So, Pops, your point spot on. Whether we're talking about a board of directors or just members of a team, and if you want to gain alignment with all of them and you're not comfortable getting up in front of them and rousing the crowd, then do it one-on-one through cups of coffee, through beers, through lunch, through whatever. But those one-on-one conversations can do it. I think that's such a great point.
All right, very good. Number 3, adapting proactively. Now, we love this one because one of the things we've seen in all the study we've done of good leadership is that leaders who remain relevant over long periods of time have the ability to adapt. This says CEOs that adapt quickly are almost 7 times more likely to be successful. Here's what that says to you, introvert. you cannot get stuck in your ways and be unwilling to make changes on the fly as you get better information.
Yeah, and this is tough because the introvert personality typically is resistant to change. It finds comfort in the normal, in the day-to-day, in the routine. So it's making your routine that you are constantly looking at your environment, looking at, right? So you have to make this part of who you are. And look, you can learn to thrive through change. You can adapt and adjust your brain. I mean, the idea of neuroscience and studying neuroplasticity, we know we can teach ourselves. We can't teach those old dogs new tricks. So, but that's something you have to do. And frankly, it takes intent and focus and someone to hold you accountable. So, I mean, setting up that time regularly to look at who we are, what we do, what's our market position. I mean, Pops, we call it battling irrelevance, right? We constantly want to be looking, and I want to proactively battle irrelevance, not constantly react to things that are changing. So, man, seven times more likely to succeed. It's huge.
Absolutely. And, we were talking about something off camera that you brought up that I think really makes sense is if you're an older boomer like me and you're still wearing 30-year-old fashion wide lapels and vests and, cuffed pants and all that kind of thing, hey, that might be your thing, and your suits may last 1,000 years and you're totally fine with that. And you don't like to waste money on new clothes, but understand that there's a perception of your inability to adapt. For millennials, you want to come with, a mohawk and tattoos and, shorts and flip-flops. Good for you, brother. But understand that people are looking at you and say, you don't have the look of a leader, right?
Well, let's go back to that previous study, right? That there is a look of a leader. And, me, Pops, I'm the biggest advocate for board shorts and a tank top, right? I mean, I'm all in. Doing work on the beach with margaritas is my favorite place to be. However, I also understand that there is a perception, there's a way that people look, and I want to be seen as that forward-thinking modern leader. So I choose to dress a certain way so I'm perceived a certain way, right? And that's not me. Well, you care about what people think. Well, no, like I have complete confidence in myself and I care about what my family and my loved ones think. However, I also want to be perceived as someone who can add value, who can help educate and grow your organization. So part of me is like, I'm not saying the man is making me do something a certain way. It's like, no, like I'm understand the rules of the game and I'm playing within them. Like basic human nature, and I'm going to give myself the best opportunity to be successful. Absolutely.
It's just that simple.
Absolutely.
Or I can be a rebel and tell people I don't want to do it your way. So good luck.
That's right. And guess what? That will attract certain people, but it will also reject a lot of certain people.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Number 4, Robbie, is I think self-evident. Delivering reliably. Employees and stakeholders will trust a proven leader who does what they say they're going to do. Right? Yeah. There's nothing worse than a leader who has big vision and has big objectives, but doesn't follow through, doesn't execute. In fact, we see it. We quoted the study in our book, Counter Mentor Leadership, How to Unlock the Potential of the 4th-Generation Workplace, #shameless plug. Make sure you find it on Amazon. Nice. But we quoted this article from Harvard Business Review, I think going back to 2016. You have to be able to produce results while you're also a people person. You have to be able to do both. If you're not seen as somebody that can produce results, you're pretty much done as a leader.
Well, and let's be clear too that introverts are typically this is their sweet spot. This is their bread and butter. Like right. This is what they've made their name on. So look, I mean, the point of this is all 4 of these things: deciding with speed and conviction, engaging people for impact, really getting people on the bus, adapting proactively, and delivering reliably. Again, quoting this article from, this was an Inc. article that was written in response to the study done by the Genome Project. These can all be done whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. That's the big point here. Extroverts don't make better leaders. They don't just all of a sudden they're better. Now, do extroverts have certain personality styles that make them better at 2 of these 4 bullets? Yes, but guess what? Introverts, 2 of these 4 bullets, you're better at naturally. So it's all about having the discipline and the desire to be that great leader and to know thyself, put great people around you to help you balance your strengths and weaknesses. I mean, that's what leadership is. Stop making the freaking excuse that, well, I'm an introvert, so I can't be a leader. You're only fooling yourself.
Absolutely right. Hey, we got to get out of here. This is going to do it for episode number 45. Do extroverts make better leaders than introverts? Robbie, here's what we know for a fact. An introvert may see the extrovert as having a head start because they've got some of those qualities, but you don't have to let that get in your head. You can be as good a leader as anybody else. It's skills that you learn, and you can learn more about it from our book, Counter Mentor Leadership. Hey, we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us here on the Counter Mentor Leadership Podcast.
Go Sox.
Thanks for listening to the Counter Mentor Leadership Podcast.
If you like the show, you can give Robby a trophy by going to iTunes and posting a review of the show. Reviews help the show get noticed. So if you post a review, send us a note, and we'll send you a free autographed hardcover copy of the book. Just make sure you say something nice to build up his little self-esteem. By the way, you can find our book and previous podcasts at countermentors.com. Make sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Opinions expressed by guests may not represent the opinions of the hosts.